Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. They always told us that riots followed a rhythm. First, the crowd builds, chanting, pacing, pressure. Then, someone throws something. A bottle, a flare, a slur. It spreads like electricity through wet pavement, and suddenly, you're in the middle of something far beyond any individual action. That rhythm is predictable. It follows fear and friction. But what happened on March 17th didn't follow any rhythm I'd ever known. It didn't pulse like anger. It moved like infection, silent at first, then all-consuming. My name is Tyler Morris. I'm a sergeant with the Atlanta Police Department, assigned to the Mobile Response Division. Riot control. 13 years on the job, trained for all kinds of crowd scenarios. I've faced looters during hurricanes, anarchists during political unrest, even angry Falcons fans tipping cars after that miserable Super Bowl loss. But nothing prepared me for that day in Centennial Olympic Park. We were called in around 3 in the afternoon. The protest had started peacefully, but attendance had swelled fast. Someone had posted that city officials were moving to shut down more shelters, and with the housing crisis already on edge, people came out in droves. I rolled in with the 3rd unit near Baker Street, full gear on, helmet, visor, plate carrier, baton, radio clipped high on my shoulder. It was warm for March, almost 80 degrees. We took position shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, standard formation. At first the crowd just shouted, chanting, waving signs, the usual frustration boiling over. It wasn't until about 15 minutes in that things started to shift. Not in a loud way. In fact, the noise began to die down. At the center of the crowd, people weren't pushing forward anymore. They were collapsing. I saw the first woman fall hard onto her knees, her sign slipping from her hands. Then a man behind her dropped sideways, twitching, another behind him. Not like heat stroke or gas exposure. These weren't stumbles. They folded like puppets with cut strings. I radioed it in immediately, thinking it had to be something environmental. A gas leak maybe. Contaminated water bottles. I gave our location and called for hazmat support. I didn't get a clear response. Just static, then something garbled. It was clear from the chatter on adjacent channels that we weren't the only ones seeing strange things. Other squads across downtown were reporting similar collapses, but no one was pulling back. We were still under order to hold the line. Then things took a turn I still don't fully understand. The ones who had collapsed started standing back up, but they weren't getting up like normal people. Something was wrong. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated, like they couldn't feel their limbs. Heads rolled loosely on their shoulders, like their necks couldn't hold the weight. Their faces were blank. No fear, no confusion, just empty stares. They didn't respond to people shouting at them, didn't even flinch when others tried to pull them away. That's when the crowd began to shift. First a few steps back, then more, until people were turning, pushing away from the center in growing confusion. What had been a loud, angry protest just moments earlier started unraveling into something else, something scared. Panic was building. You could feel it rising in the way people started looking behind themselves, searching for exits. Before I could process it, someone screamed. Not the usual cry of protest or tear gas pain, a real visceral scream that split through the air like it didn't belong in the world. Then another. Dozens. But suddenly, the air changed. Bodies surged forward, shoving toward our line. Civilians trampled each other, trying to escape something behind them. Through the opening gaps, I saw one of the collapsed men launch himself onto another, tearing into him like a feral animal. I thought my mind was playing tricks. He wasn't just hitting him, he was biting. Others followed. It was like watching a switch flip in a machine. Dozens of bodies, now moving with the same unnatural stutter step, attacked anything near them. Hands clawed at shoulders, jaws snapped at necks. They didn't run. They walked fast, purposeful, focused. I started shouting for my team to retreat, to regroup, but the lines broke too fast. I was shoved from behind as the riot shield of the officer next to me collapsed inward. I turned, saw a man in civilian clothes launch himself into one of our younger officers, knocking him down and biting straight through the visor. We weren't dealing with a protest anymore. We weren't dealing with people. I drew my sidearm and fired twice, center mass, but the man kept moving, oblivious to the rounds. Only when one of our riot trucks rolled forward and clipped him at the knee did he finally drop. That's when the explosion hit. A bottle arced through the air, trailing fire. It landed not 5 feet from me, exploding against a squad car and sending debris in every direction. The shockwave knocked me backward. My helmet cracked against pavement, and everything went sideways. I remember flashes, metal twisting, radios screaming, the heavy thump of boots sprinting past me. Then, blackness. When I came to, I was no longer on the street. I was inside a cramped metal box, dimly lit, walls white and sterile. An ambulance. My helmet was gone, baton missing, vest stripped. Someone had pulled me out of the street and laid me on a stretcher. I sat up slowly, every part of my body stiff, head ringing. The ambulance wasn't moving. Outside, darkness had fallen. The front windshield was cracked and streaked red with something dried. Blood, a lot of it. Through the side window, I saw flames flickering against brick buildings. The city had gone dark. No traffic lights, no sirens. Just silence, punctuated by distant fire. I stood carefully, gripping the rail. There was no one inside but me. No driver, no medic. Just used medical wrappers, an overturned clipboard, and the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with something fouler. I moved to the rear doors. Locked, bolted from the outside. Whoever put me in here hadn't planned to return. I peered out through the small windows, careful not to draw attention. What I saw made my breath catch. The street was filled with movement. People. At least, I thought they were people. Shuffled aimlessly. Not running, not talking, just wandering. Arms slack, heads tilting unnaturally. Their clothes were torn, faces pallid, mouths open slightly like they were mid-sentence and never finished. One bumped into a light pole and just kept walking, turning its shoulder like it barely noticed the obstruction. I crouched back down, trying to keep my mind clear. If those were the same people I saw earlier, the ones who collapsed, then whatever this was, it had spread fast. I checked the interior again. Nothing I could use as a weapon. Just gauze, tape, scissors, and an oxygen tank. I pulled the medical shears from their holster and held them in my fist. Not much, but it was something. My service weapon was missing. Maybe stripped for safety. Maybe just overlooked. Either way, I was down to a pair of scissors and my uniform. I unlatched the rear window and eased it open, praying it wouldn't creak. It stuck halfway, but a good push got it moving. I listened again. No screams, just the occasional groan or dragging footstep. I slipped out slowly, landing behind the ambulance with a thud I hoped no one, or no thing, heard. Immediately I pressed against the vehicle's side, scanning left and right. To the north, the burned-out shell of a city bus. To the south, more wreckage, overturned police cars, scattered clothing, the charred remains of a protest sign still smoldering on the pavement. I crouched low, heading east towards Spring Street. My plan was simple. Get to Precinct 4, less than a mile. We had fallback protocols for mass casualty events. The station would have supplies, weapons, and maybe people. As I moved, I kept to shadows, ducking behind wrecked vehicles, crawling through storefronts with shattered windows. I passed a familiar cafe, one I'd visited during lunch breaks, now reduced to broken chairs and smashed glass. No bodies, but the smell lingered, like meat left too long in the sun. Near the Georgia Aquarium, I found a downed officer slumped beside a cruiser. His body was untouched, but his face was pale, eyes wide open, mouth agape. No pulse. His sidearm was still in its holster. I took it, checked the magazine. Just 2 rounds left. I holstered it and kept moving. Ahead, a parking garage loomed, dark but intact. It offered elevation, maybe a place to regroup, assess. I entered cautiously, ears straining. Inside, the silence was heavier, thicker. I climbed to the 2nd floor, crouching behind a pillar. From up there, I could see down Peachtree Street. Fires burned in clusters. The CNN center was half lit, its windows reflecting red. The Ferris wheel spun slowly, unnaturally, powered either by a dying circuit or someone who never turned it off. Below, figures moved through the streets like ants, slow but endless. I didn't stay long, too exposed. I made my way back down and crossed toward a subway entrance near 5 Points. As I descended the stairs, a noise startled me. A voice, quiet but urgent. "Over here, keep quiet." At the bottom, behind a maintenance door, someone was waving. A man, maybe mid-40s, eyes sharp, holding a wrench. Behind him, 2 others, a young woman in a gas station uniform and a kid, no more than 15. They pulled me inside quickly, bolting the door. It was pitch black inside, the only light coming from a battery-powered lamp balanced on a box. The man looked me over, then nodded. "Cop, huh? You're the first we've seen still upright." I didn't answer right away. I just leaned against the wall and let the silence take me for a moment. The concrete behind me was damp, radiating the chill of the underground. Somewhere above, something metal clanged, distant, hollow, but enough to make one of the others shift their feet uneasily. The air inside the service room was stale, laced with rust and old oil. I stared at the floor, scuffed and dark, until the dull hum of the battery lantern on the box brought me back to the present. The man who had pulled me in finally spoke again, more gently this time. "Name's Darnell. This is Maddie and her kid brother Eli. You're lucky we saw you coming down the stairs. That street's crawling now. You made it out of all that alone?" I nodded slowly, then finally forced out a few words. "I was in an ambulance, locked inside. I think they put me in there after the explosion. I don't know how long it's been." Darnell just nodded. "You're the first badge we've seen. If anyone else made it out, they didn't make it down here." That didn't surprise me. I'd seen the crowd break, scatter like leaves in wind, but the wind had chased them. Whatever had started this, virus, chemical, something worse, it had spread through the park like water through paper. The riot wasn't just a flashpoint, it was the ignition. Centennial Park had been ground zero, whether by chance or design. Maddie sat against a utility locker, her knees hugged tight to her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept in a day, but she still kept an arm stretched protectively in front of Eli, who leaned beside her with earbuds in, volume just loud enough to faintly make out some kind of podcast or music. His eyes stayed down. I recognized the look. Distraction was easier than thinking too hard about what was above. "How long have you been down here?" I asked. "2 nights, maybe 3. Hard to tell anymore," Darnell replied. We were at the Civic Center station. When the lights started failing and the noise started carrying through the tunnels, we figured it was time to move. Found this maintenance junction through an old gate in the service hall. Haven't seen anyone else since. I looked around. The space couldn't have been more than 15 feet across. A pair of emergency blankets, some crushed food wrappers, a single empty water jug, and a few tools stacked beside the wall. I didn't ask where they got the food. People were probably still fleeing when they stocked up. Most never had time to think ahead. I leaned down and unzipped a corner of my jacket. The bruises from the riot still flared when I moved, though the pain had faded to a dull throb, something more structural than surface level. I checked the pistol I'd picked up earlier. 2 rounds. Enough to matter, but not enough to rely on. I stuffed it back inside my waistband and considered my options. Hiding wasn't going to last, not with the city grid breaking down above. "Do you have any radio, scanner, anything?" I asked. Darnell shook his head. "We tried a few old police bands, just static. One station played music for a while, an old blues loop like from a diner jukebox, but it cut out around midnight. After that, nothing. No sirens, no planes, no choppers, just silence. That silence said more than words could. No air support, no rescue routes, no announcements. If any kind of perimeter had been set up, it hadn't reached downtown. That meant we were inside the containment. Or worse, there was no containment at all. I knew the nearest precinct, Zone 5 on Spring Street, was less than a mile away. That was where backup had been expected to form. If any officers had regrouped, they'd have headed there. It also meant access to comms, supplies, and a potential fallback point. But if the infected had spread across Midtown, even reaching the outer station wall might be impossible. I stood and scanned the room again. I need to move. If I can reach the precinct, I might be able to find working comms. If not, maybe a safe way out of the city. "You're going out there alone?" Maddie looked up now, her voice tight. "There's no choice," I said. "Staying here buys time, but that time runs out as soon as food or power does. We're not safe just because we're hidden." Darnell nodded, though reluctantly. "There's an old vent shaft in the back, big enough to crawl through. Dumps out into the lower stairwell near Peachtree Center. Used to be a storm overflow. Quiet, mostly. That would put me near the Atlanta streetcar line, just south of where I'd entered the subway. If the area wasn't overrun, I could move west toward the precinct without retracing my steps. I crouched by the vent, tested the old rusted bolts, and began working them free with a spanner from the floor. Before I crawled in, I turned back. If I make it to the station, I'll try to send something back. Signal, radio call, anything. Darnell nodded again, though I wasn't sure if it was hope or just habit. I ducked into the vent, pulling myself along by elbows and knees. The metal groaned softly, echoing behind me. The smell changed as I moved, less human, more water and mold. The tunnel curved, narrowed, then opened into a drop shaft. I lowered myself onto an old ladder and descended into darkness, finally landing in ankle-deep runoff. The stairwell beyond was partially collapsed but passable. I climbed until I found a service door half off its hinges, pushed it open, and emerged onto the street. The first thing that struck me was how quiet the city had become. Midtown Atlanta was usually a constant hum, cars, voices, the low vibration of transit lines. Now, only wind moved through the towers. Papers skittered across sidewalks. A distant fire crackled weakly, somewhere between the MARTA line and the hotel strip. I kept low, sticking to the shadows, weaving through side streets. A CVS had been gutted, metal gate torn open, glass blown out. No bodies inside, just overturned shelves and a broken fridge humming uselessly in the corner. I moved on, taking stock of the destruction as I passed. At the corner of Lucky and Ted Turner Drive, I spotted a group of infected clustered around a delivery truck. They stood close, too close, bodies swaying gently as if listening to some shared signal. One of them reached up and touched the side of the truck, smearing something across the white paint. None of them noticed me, even as I slipped behind a planter 10 yards away. They didn't speak, didn't groan much, only an occasional grunt or snort, like a cough swallowed halfway. Their stillness was the worst part, like mannequins waiting for a cue that never came. I backed away slowly and circled the block. By the time I reached Spring Street, dawn had started to break. Barely. A haze hung over the city, orange and smoky like firelight trapped in smog. Zone 5 sat like a bunker, its brick facade smeared with soot, the front glass shattered. One cruiser burned near the side lot, and the gate was broken open. I moved quickly, checking corners, then entered through a side door once used for staff deliveries. Inside, the station was silent. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in intermittent spurts. The front lobby had been ransacked, furniture pushed against the doors, blood streaked across the floor. Someone had tried to hold it, but whoever they were, they didn't win. I swept through the first floor quickly. No bodies, no movement. Only a single terminal in the dispatch room still glowed, powered by emergency backup. I logged in using my credentials and opened the radio relay panel. No active units, no regional beacons. The statewide emergency net pinged, then stalled. I tried broadcasting anyway. "This is Sergeant Tyler Morris, APD. Zone 5 is breached. Midtown compromised. Survivors may be underground near Peachtree Center. Repeat, Zone 5 holding temporarily. If any units receive, respond." I repeated the call twice more before switching frequencies. On the fifth attempt, I caught something, just 3 words. North, perimeter, fire, then nothing. I stared at the console, hand frozen above the switch. There was something out there, somewhere north. Someone else was still transmitting. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep moving. I found a first aid bag in the break room, tore open a ration bar, and ate it without tasting. My hands trembled as I reloaded the spare rounds I found in the captain's office. The supply closet still had spare vests. I tightened one over my gear and took 2 extra flashlights. No map, no proper plan, just forward. As I stepped back into the street, the sun had crested the edge of the skyline, turning the city into jagged silhouettes and smoke. A chorus of distant sirens began to wail. Not real ones, just the echoing alarms of cars long abandoned, triggered by movement or heat. The city sang now, but not the way it used to. This was the dirge of something ending. Nothing about it resembled the rhythm of Atlanta before. No clatter of early buses, no cyclists, no footsteps heading to work. Just alarms crying into the silence, and the low, almost imperceptible moan of wind dragging through broken glass. I made my way around the station's perimeter, keeping to the wall where the shadows were thickest. I didn't plan to stay. I'd seen enough inside to know no help was coming. I scrawled a message in grease pencil across the inside wall of the staff door. Zone 5 compromised. 1 survivor. Underground shelter 400 yards southeast. Pass south. I didn't know if the 3 I'd met would find it. I didn't know if anyone would. But the act of writing it, of doing something, even that felt like reclaiming some part of what had been lost. The streets ahead were less crowded now. Not because the infected had thinned, but because their movement had shifted. The early frenzy, the noise, the confusion, it had scattered them like ash in wind. Now they drifted across intersections and sidewalks in pairs or loose clusters, drawn to any motion, sound, or trace of life. They didn't howl or sprint. They didn't speak. They just moved with slow, brutal persistence. Eyes glassy, limbs stiff, clothing stained and clinging. The closer you looked, the more you noticed small, horrifying details. Lips worn to pulp from chewing, hands blackened from dried blood and asphalt, feet torn open inside half-untied shoes. I stuck to the gaps between buildings, cutting behind a parking structure and into a delivery alley that ran past the Westin. The path there was choked with detritus, suitcases, purses, shoes. The kinds of things people dropped when running didn't leave time for grabbing. A silver stroller lay overturned beside a crumpled pink blanket, and I didn't stop to look closer. No reason to. By the time I reached the edge of the Peachtree Center complex, the fire from the night before had flared up again. A full corner of the adjacent tower was scorched black, windows melted out like eyes gouged clean. The air was thicker here, heavy with a chemical tang. Somewhere below, a gas line had likely cracked, feeding the flames now crawling up the building's steel ribs. I moved faster, knowing I couldn't stay exposed. Even if the infected didn't notice me, the smoke might draw their attention, and I had no interest in testing whether firelight worked like noise. My goal now was clear: get underground again, somewhere deeper, where the infected couldn't drift, where visibility and noise were less of a constant threat. The only place that made sense was the train tunnels, not the active MARTA lines. I didn't trust anything still running power, but the abandoned sections, the older loops left from the early 20th century expansions. I remembered reading about them once in a city infrastructure brief. Tunnels dug in the 1920s and capped off after years of disuse. Some converted into telecom pathways, others just bricked up and forgotten. One such tunnel intersected the lower maintenance level near Forsyth Street. Getting there meant passing the old library annex. As I crossed the small plaza, I saw movement up ahead. Something fast. My hand tensed around the grip of the pistol, though I didn't raise it. I stayed low and stepped between the benches toward the entrance alcove. The motion came again, a flicker of shadow against the glass. I stopped. Then I heard voices. Not groans, not dragging feet. Actual human voices. A man cursing softly, and another telling him to quiet down. I edged forward and glanced through the broken window. Inside, 2 men crouched behind a fallen bookshelf, their backs to the window. One held a hunting rifle, the other was rifling through a satchel. They looked ragged but alive. I started to call out, but something made me pause. The man with the satchel pulled out a flare and cracked it without hesitation. The bright red bloom filled the interior with sudden, blinding light. They didn't flinch, which meant they weren't worried about drawing attention. They wanted to be seen. Seconds later, a third figure appeared. Female, early 30s maybe, with a machete slung across her back and a radio on her belt. She walked confidently, not scanning corners, not even glancing at the door. This wasn't panic. This was procedure. That's when I saw the markings on the rifleman's coat. A white triangle with an orange line through it. Clean slate. I'd heard rumors of the group before. Private contractors, former military, even ex-law enforcement. They weren't exactly looters, not in the traditional sense. They operated with discipline and a purpose. But it wasn't a humanitarian one. They moved fast through outbreak zones, clearing structures, burning bodies, and destroying anything deemed compromised. Survivors who didn't cooperate were considered collateral. The city had never officially recognized them, but their presence usually meant someone powerful wanted to cut ties with a location and clean up after. I backed away slowly, careful not to step on broken glass. I wasn't going to risk contact, not without knowing their objective. I turned south again and ducked into the closest storm grate alley, kicking in a bent gate that led to the old utility service platform. The narrow staircase behind it dropped 2 levels down. It was tight, damp, and smelled like rotted paper, but it would get me to the old access corridor that paralleled the closed train spur beneath Broad Street. Down there, the sound changed. Above, the city wailed in scattered alarms. Down here, it was pure stillness, except for the occasional distant clang, probably from metal pipes cooling unevenly or loose ducts shifting. I moved along the corridor by flashlight, using the weak beam to guide my steps. The walls were flaking with water damage, old graffiti nearly erased by time. Free the 99% still barely showed in peeling red near a utility hatch, an old city marker dated 1987. Half a mile in, I found the entrance to the older tunnel section. Someone had attempted to seal it off with a steel plate, but part of it had been removed, either cut or broken, creating a jagged opening just wide enough to squeeze through. I dropped my backpack, pushed the plate aside, and crawled in. Beyond, the space opened into a wider chamber, part of the defunct power grid network once used to cool and vent the train lines before upgrades made it obsolete. It was pitch dark, but the ground was stable and dry. I found a spot against the wall, where conduit pipes curved overhead, and sat down. I needed rest. Not sleep, not yet, but stillness. Time to let my thoughts catch up. I turned off the flashlight and let the dark settle. There, in the silence, things became clearer. The riot had been a fuse, not a spontaneous outbreak, not a slow trickle. A flashpoint timed and placed for maximum damage. Midtown Atlanta, on a weekday, with public transit full, hotels occupied, offices at near capacity, a crowd of thousands, mixed ages, mixed health, mixed access to information, all gathered in one spot. Then the collapse. First a few, then dozens, then chaos, and afterward, immediate silence from dispatch. No national alert, no warning systems deployed, just darkness and confusion. If it had been natural, a virus or mutation, it would have spread gradually, with isolated reports, a slow curve, erratic infection zones. But this wasn't erratic. This was exact. And now clean slate was here, which meant someone knew. Someone had expected this, or worse, orchestrated it. I stayed in that tunnel for several hours, rationing the water I'd taken from the precinct, keeping the flashlight off unless absolutely necessary. Eventually the sound of footsteps echoed faintly down the tunnel. Not hurried, not staggering, calm. I lifted the pistol quietly. The beam of a flashlight flicked on 50 feet down the passage. A silhouette moved in front of it, small, narrow frame, not infected. The figure stopped. "You the one who left the message at Zone 5? It was a boy's voice. Familiar. I lowered the gun slightly and stepped forward into the dim circle of light. "Eli?" He nodded. He looked rough, mud smeared on his cheek, sweatshirt torn at the sleeve, but his eyes were sharp. "My sister and Darnell are close behind. We saw your message. Came up the sewer cutoff by the Marriott. Figured you were heading this way." Eli's voice echoed softly down the old tunnel, bouncing off rusted pipework and cracked brick. I took a moment to register the surreal image. This kid, no older than 15, navigating abandoned infrastructure beneath a collapsing city like he'd done it a dozen times before. He handed me a flashlight with a half-dead battery and glanced back over his shoulder. A few moments later, Maddie appeared from the shadows, one hand on the wall, the other wrapped tightly around the makeshift sling that held a crowbar along her back. Darnell followed, hauling a pack I didn't remember him having earlier. His eyes caught mine, and he gave a short nod. He looked worse than before, a new rip across his jacket and grime smeared across his face. But they were all here, still moving, still alive. We passed maybe 24 of them along the way, Maddie whispered as she came up beside me. Shufflers mostly, quiet, didn't chase, didn't react, just standing in corners or against walls like they forgot what they were doing. They've been like that all morning, I said. It's almost like they're stalling. For what? Darnell muttered, but I didn't have an answer, and neither did he. We stood in silence for a beat before I turned back toward the tunnel's south exit. There's someone we need to find, I said. Northwest side, old industrial stretch near Marietta Street, about 1.5 miles on foot. Darnell tilted his head. Someone you trust? Not exactly, but I know where he is, and I know what he has. Which is? Weapons, possibly radios, burn phones, maybe even access to old emergency nets, the kind that still run on copper, independent lines that don't go dark when the towers do. Maddie glanced at Eli, then looked back at me. Who is this guy? I paused for a moment before answering. His name's Marcus Dunn, used to be one of the big suppliers for the English Avenue corridor, pushed synthetic crap through every housing block west of Northside Drive. That was before the RICO sweep in 26. He turned state's witness to save his own neck, gave us everything, names, drop points, even the stash house locations. It put his old crew behind bars and bought him a spot in witness relocation. Darnell exhaled. And they relocated him right back into Atlanta? They moved him to a quiet warehouse zone under a fake name, gave him a limited contact tracker, and cut him loose with conditions. Last I heard, he was working as a parts runner out of an old machine shop. He was smart enough to keep something back when he flipped. I'd bet anything he's still armed and still listening. And you think he'll help? I think he'll do what keeps him breathing the longest. And right now, that's cooperating with us. We moved quickly after that, following the maintenance line south until we reached a rusted exit grate behind the Tabernacle building. The climb up was slow. Darnell went first, testing each rung before letting the rest of us follow. The alley above was cluttered with overturned trash bins and collapsed fencing, but empty. We stepped out into the early afternoon light, though you wouldn't have known it by the color of the sky. Grey smoke blanketed everything, filtering the sun into a dull smear behind the clouds. The air stank of melted plastic, ash, and something else beneath it all. Decay, wet and clinging to the inside of your nose. Downtown Atlanta, or what remained of it, was no longer a battlefield. It was aftermath. Every street felt like a museum exhibit frozen in the exact moment chaos had won. Burned-out cars blocked intersections. Shop fronts were shattered, with displays half-looted and mannequins missing limbs. Digital billboards still flashed ads for weekend festivals that would never happen. Somewhere nearby, a car alarm wailed intermittently before fading to silence again. We stayed close to the buildings, ducking beneath shattered awnings and creeping through side passages. I led the way past Centennial Yards, cutting under the rail bridge toward the Fulton Bag and Cotton Mill ruins. The infected were there too, scattered, solitary figures standing motionless or wandering in slow, directionless arcs across the empty lots. We skirted them all, keeping out of sight, never staying still for more than a few seconds at a time. We reached the edge of Marietta Street about 40 minutes later. The machine shop Marcus had been assigned to, under the name Dorian King, sat 2 blocks in. A squat, tan brick warehouse with a faded mural on one wall and steel-shuttered windows. It used to repair power tools and engines, but I'd seen the interior once during a site check. Reinforced doors, steel cages on the inside, lots of blind corners. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad right now. I signaled the others to stay low as we approached the side door. I took the lead and rapped once, then twice, then once again. The old knock I'd used back during surveillance. A few seconds passed. Nothing. I tried again. This time, a voice came through the steel. "Move along." "Marcus," I said firmly. "It's Morris, APD, Sergeant. You remember?" Another pause, then a metallic click. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a pair of sharp eyes behind wire mesh. "Didn't think you'd survive," Marcus said. He looked older than I remembered. Hair gone completely grey at the temples, skin pulled tight across his face. But his voice was the same. Smooth, careful, never offering more than needed. "You're not surprised I came?" "I'm surprised it took you this long." I stepped through the door, signaling for the others to follow. Inside, the air was cooler, filtered. A generator somewhere hummed softly. The workshop space had been stripped of most equipment. Tables had been pushed into defensive positions, creating lanes and bottlenecks. An improvised safe zone. There were weapon racks along the back wall, shotguns, rifles, even an old AR pattern carbine, with the dust barely brushed off. Marcus leaned against the edge of a bench and gestured toward a plastic cooler. "Water's still good. Took it from the rooftop tanks before things got bad. You want it? Take it." Darnell grabbed 2 bottles and tossed one to Maddie. Eli wandered to the far side, taking in the sheer number of tools and the layout of the room. He didn't touch anything. Marcus turned back to me. "I'm guessing this isn't a social visit. We need access to radio bands. Long wave if you've got it. Satellite would be better." He raised an eyebrow. "You think anyone's still listening?" "I think there's a difference between being alone and being out of options. You know how this city works. If command pulled back, they'd leave some ears open, probably off-grid relay towers, or emergency shortwave setups near the airport or CDC. Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he walked to the back and opened a long steel cabinet. Inside was a military-style field transceiver, old but clean. I kept it as insurance. Couldn't exactly give up everything now, could I? He powered it on, tuning the dial slowly while we waited in silence. Static gave way to occasional bursts, garbled speech, faint tones, music, then something faint but intelligible. "If you're still inside the metro zone, avoid exposure vectors. Transmission pathways not fully confirmed. Interim evacuation staging no longer active. Repeat, Zone 1 evac is null. This is a recorded loop." The message repeated every 15 seconds. The accent was Midwestern, flat, automated. I wrote down the frequency and stepped away. It wasn't what we needed, but it was something. Confirmation that some infrastructure still functioned. Someone had bothered to record that message. Someone wanted it to be heard. Marcus leaned close. "Whatever you're thinking of doing next, don't expect this city to bounce back. This isn't a crisis. It's a rewrite." I stared at him for a long moment. He meant it. Not in the paranoid way, but with quiet certainty. Whatever was happening wasn't accidental. It was structured, executed. I took one of the shotguns from the rack and checked the chamber. Loaded, 5 in the tube. Solid pump-action model. No frills. I need to get to the relay station near Old Fourth Ward. If they're still broadcasting, they'll be doing it from the elevated tower next to the industrial park. If not, maybe I can use it to get something out. Even a burst. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You'll need masks. The wind's changing direction, bringing all kinds of new questions with it." We stayed long enough to rest, hydrate, and strip down our gear for anything useful. Marcus handed us 3 short-range radios, all preset to private channels. No cell reception anymore, but these would work line of sight. As we stepped back out into the street, the air had shifted again. More still somehow, like even the city itself had paused. I glanced back once toward the warehouse, then forward toward the tower that loomed faintly on the edge of the skyline. It stood like a relic from another era, perched above the tangle of rooftops and old smokestacks. Its red warning lights dark now, its latticework black against the faded afternoon sky. That relay station had once been part of Atlanta's analog backbone, later repurposed during the digital transition as a broadcast fallback. If any place still had power and reach, it was there. We moved northeast through the ruins of the warehouse district, past stacks of rusted shipping containers and collapsed scaffolding. This part of the city had always felt more industrial than residential, long streets lined with old depots, gravel yards, and blank walls tagged with faded graffiti. Now it felt like a graveyard. No birds, no stray cats, not even rats. Just wind, carrying the dry stench of scorched insulation and something deeper beneath it. We passed an auto repair garage where a tow truck sat half lifted with its cab door wide open, keys still dangling from the ignition. Darnell paused long enough to scavenge a flashlight and a length of metal pipe from a collapsed tool chest. He didn't need to explain. A second weapon, silent, reliable, might matter more than a sidearm if we were forced into tight quarters. We kept moving. Every few blocks we passed more of them, the infected. Some stood with their backs to walls, facing into corners as if listening. Others wandered slow loops across parking lots, dragging broken limbs or hunched low as if searching for something in the dust. They didn't speak, didn't call out. They simply existed in motion, pulled forward by some unseen gravity. One stood in the middle of a cracked basketball court, arms limp at its sides, head tilted back toward the hazy sky, as if transfixed by a sun that never returned. We avoided them all. Sound was the danger. Footsteps, dropped gear, even coughing. Anything that broke the pattern of the silence could draw them. We didn't test how many. We assumed the worst and treated every one of them as a tripwire. It took nearly an hour to cover the mile to the edge of the old Fourth Ward. We passed the remains of the Beltline Trail, now choked with overgrowth and splintered boards. The Ponce City Market Tower loomed nearby, its upper windows shattered, its iconic rooftop letters scorched and broken. At its base, the streets were barricaded with overturned delivery vans and bolted trash dumpsters, as if someone had tried to create a blockade, but no one had stayed to defend it. Not anymore. We reached the relay tower just after 4 in the afternoon. The sun had dipped behind the clouds again, casting the skyline in cold grey light. The tower sat within a fenced compound, razor wire across the top, access panels on the side walls of the small operations building at its base. The chain-link gate had been forced open, the padlock cut clean. We approached slowly, with Eli watching the rear, Darnell covering our flank. I stepped through the gate first, pistol drawn. Inside, the ground was littered with torn paper and scraps of plastic packaging, ration wrappers, broken circuit boxes, a cracked pair of night vision goggles. Whoever had been here last left fast. The building door hung open, its hinges buckled outward from a kick or battering ram. I held up a hand, and we paused just outside. I listened. No movement inside. No groans. No shuffling. Just the low hum of backup power still trickling through the systems. I entered first, followed by Maddie and Darnell. The room inside was small, lined with server cabinets and radio panels. A cracked monitor flickered weakly near the back, displaying a system diagnostic loop that had likely been running since the grid collapse. The emergency lights had gone red, power reserves down to critical, but the transceiver console was intact. I moved to it immediately and scanned the surface. Burned in the dust were fingerprints. Someone had used it recently. I flipped the switch and watched the tubes warm. Static came first, followed by faint signals, some in English, some not. I adjusted the gain and flipped through memory banks, hoping for any sign of human contact. On channel 6, I found it, a voice barely above the noise floor. Northern line, decayed perimeter, quarantine breached, pushing west. It looped, irregularly, like someone had recorded a quick burst and set it to transmit on repeat. I listened again. The voice was male, southern accent, calm but rushed. Stone Mountain fallback is down. Civilian traffic advised to redirect. No air response. Stone Mountain, that was east. If fallback locations were already failing there, it meant the collapse wasn't just downtown. It had spread outward, maybe fast, maybe across the metro entirely. I noted the frequency, toggled the input, and tried transmitting. This is Sergeant Tyler Morris, Atlanta PD. 4 survivors present at Tower 9, Old Fourth Ward. We are alive. Requesting confirmation of any functioning safe zones. Repeat. 4 survivors. 1 officer, located at Broadcast Relay Tower 9. No reply. I repeated it 3 more times, each time slower, clearer, pacing my breath. Still nothing. I shut the system down, and looked back at the others. "We're not getting an answer," I said, "but someone out there tried to warn people. That means they're still transmitting from somewhere. They're moving west." Darnell wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket. "If they're heading west, they're either aiming for the river or leaving the city altogether." Maddie crossed her arms tightly. "Then we need to do the same." It wasn't as simple as just heading west, though. We needed routes, supplies, a plan. Leaving the city without knowing what was on the other side could get us trapped between ruins and worse. We agreed to hold at the tower until nightfall and gather intel from any broadcasts we could intercept. Eli helped me reset the station's signal booster to scan full sweep across the low-band frequencies. I gave him instructions, and he followed them quickly, calmly. He might have been young, but he'd adapted faster than most adults I knew. Something in him had locked onto survival without hesitation. While the radio scanned, I checked the back of the station. A stairwell led to the roof. I climbed it slowly, emerging onto the flat concrete top of the operations building. From there, the skyline opened in all directions. I saw downtown Atlanta to the west, smoke rising from what remained of the courthouse and financial district. To the north, Buckhead glittered faintly, untouched by fire but not by fear. Eastward, the suburbs stretched in broken lines, dotted with empty intersections and dark windows. Then I saw something moving, northwest, near the river bend. A convoy. 5 vehicles spaced tight. 2 flatbed trucks, 1 armored van, a Humvee, and a fuel tanker. They rolled down Marietta Boulevard at a steady pace. No headlights, no sirens. Discipline, purpose. This wasn't a random survivor group. This was planned. I called down for Darnell, and he joined me on the roof a minute later. He spotted them immediately. "Military?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not regular. Too small. No escort drones. No overheads. Might be private." We watched as the convoy moved out of sight behind a crumbling overpass. Where they were going, I didn't know, but they weren't stopping to help. Night came fast. The sky turned purple, then black, lit only by the flicker of occasional fires. Maddie and Eli kept watch inside while I worked with Darnell to check the remaining supplies and secure the compound. We didn't have much. A few bottles of water, 3 loaded firearms between us, and what little food we'd picked up from the precinct and the machine shop. It wouldn't last long. Just before midnight, the radio crackled again, this time with something new. "Repeat. North perimeter compromised. Casualties high. Proceed to checkpoint 14 if able. Do not enter downtown sectors. Containment protocols failed. This message will repeat." The transmission was stronger, clearer. The origin couldn't have been far, maybe 3-4 miles. That meant someone was still operating a command net. Checkpoint 14. We didn't have a map, but I remembered the designation from old National Guard drills. CP-14 had once referred to a staging site near the Georgia Tech campus, just off North Avenue. If anyone was still holding a line, it might be there. I looked to the others. That's where we're going next. If they're transmitting, they might still be evacuating, or at least organizing resistance. No one disagreed. Before we left the tower, I adjusted the signal again, reset the burst beacon to our location, and left a looped message repeating our path. If anyone came after us, they'd know where we'd gone. We moved out at dawn. The tower faded behind us as the light returned, pale and tired. We didn't know how many people were left alive in Atlanta. We didn't know if the checkpoint still held, or if the roads west even existed in usable form anymore. But we moved anyway, quiet, armed, and aligned around one simple truth. Whatever had happened here wasn't over, and whatever came next, we would meet it standing. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.